She was invisible. She spent her days cleaning the traces of other people's lives, believing that her story would always be one of servitude and oblivion. But the universe had already prepared something she could never have imagined. What seemed like just another cleaning routine was about to become the beginning of a transformation that would change her life forever. Every morning, the alarm rang before sunrise. She got up with her body aching from the previous day's cleaning, put on her worn-out uniform, and caught the crowded bus. The journey was long, standing, squeezed among strangers who, like her, struggled to survive. But unlike many, she did not carry on her face the hope of a better future. She carried only the resignation of someone who believed life would always be the same. In the luxurious building where she worked, every detail shone, except her. The floors gleamed, the windows sparkled, the expensive furniture was treated with care. But no one noticed the woman who made it all happen. Rare greetings, indifferent looks, awkward silences. With every corridor cleaned, she felt that her own existence was being swept away along with the dust. Her hands were always rough from the cleaning products, and her knees complained from the hours spent kneeling on the floor. But what hurt most was not physical. It was emotional. It hurt to know she was treated as a disposable detail. It hurt to think that maybe this was all there was, to be born, to work hard, and to die without leaving any trace. Sometimes, as she watched the residents of the building leaving in expensive cars, wearing elegant clothes and carrying schedules full of commitments, she wondered, do they know that I exist? Do they know that I also have dreams? Her heart answered yes, she had dreams, but her mind quickly silenced it. Dreams are not for you. At home, the exhaustion continued. Even after hours of cleaning, she still cooked, washed clothes, helped her children with schoolwork. The routine seemed endless. Her salary barely covered the basics, and there were always overdue bills. It was as if she lived on a tightrope, balancing not to fall into an abyss of debts and frustrations. The worst part was the guilt. Every time her children asked for something she couldn't give, she felt like a failing mother. Every time her husband suggested some plan they couldn't carry out, she felt even smaller. The word failure echoed in her mind as if it were engraved on her skin. Even so, inside her there was a silent flame. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it existed. A soft voice whispered, "This is not the end. There is something greater waiting for you." That voice was easily drowned out by the noise of bills, by the weight of responsibilities, and by the exhausting routine, but it never completely disappeared. The days went on the same, and she believed she was condemned to this life of invisibility. However, without her realizing it, the universe was already moving behind the scenes. It was preparing an encounter, a revelation, a powerful secret that would change her story. The cleaning lady who today saw herself as no one was destined to become an example for many. And so, between the cleaning cloth and the silence of the early mornings, the prelude to a transformation was born. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to prove that no story is too small to be rewritten when the heart decides to believe. With each passing day, she felt herself fading a little more. It wasn't just her body wearing down, it was her soul growing heavy. She did her work with dedication, but it was as if it was never enough. If she cleaned quickly, they said it wasn't well done. If she took too long, they said she was slow. There was never any true recognition. Her faded uniform seemed like a stamp on her identity, "You're just a cleaning lady." This phrase was never spoken out loud, but it was present in the looks, the attitudes, the small gestures of indifference. While others wore elegant clothes and spoke of business, travel, and dreams, she carried buckets and cloths, hearing only the sound of her own labored breathing. During breaks, she sat alone with her simple lunchbox, while watching her office colleagues gather in nearby restaurants. Many times, the conversations reached her like echoes from a distant world: vacation plans, new cars, apartments in the city. Every word seemed to remind her that she lived in a parallel universe, where prosperity was not an option. At home, things were no better. Money barely covered the essentials. The children asked for simple toys, and she replied with painful excuses: maybe next month. Her husband, tired of the daily struggle, often kept silent so as not to show his frustration. And the silence at home was even heavier than the noise at work. At night, she lay down in bed with an exhausted body but a restless mind. She asked herself why she seemed condemned to a life of effort without reward. Did I do something wrong? Will I never get out of this place? The tears fell, and she hid them in the pillow so no one would see her pain. The weight of comparison also crushed her. On social media, she saw other women posting photos of trips, achievements, and smiles. Meanwhile, she had nothing but exhaustion and debt. Her heart filled with silent envy, mixed with the shame of desiring a life that seemed impossible. Little by little, she began to believe there really was no way out. The phrase, "I wasn't born to win," had become almost a negative mantra she repeated without noticing. It was as if she had accepted the idea that her life would always be limited, always small, always invisible. But even in her darkest days, something inside her refused to die. It was like a stubborn flame that resisted the winds of hopelessness. No matter how many times reality tried to crush it, that flame reignited, even if only faintly. She couldn't explain it, but she felt there was something waiting for her. As if the universe kept a surprise that would only be revealed at the right moment. That feeling, though vague, was enough to keep her standing, even when everything screamed for her to give up. And so, between silent tears and repetitive days, life began setting the stage for an unexpected turning point. The woman who believed she was only a cleaning lady was about to discover that within her lived a power far greater than she imagined. There were days when she seriously thought of giving everything up. She saw no point in continuing to fight against a life that seemed to have no way out. Her body was tired, her mind exhausted, and her heart too wounded to believe in any change. The thought that nothing will ever get better was like a constant weight on her shoulders. One morning, as she looked at her wrinkled uniform, she felt the urge to tear it apart. It was as if that piece of clothing were the prison that kept her trapped in a destiny of servitude. But she quickly remembered the pile of bills on the table and the mouths that needed to be fed. Anger gave way to despair. There was no way to simply give up. At work, the humiliation seemed even greater. One day, she overheard whispered comments about her appearance, about how she looked too tired for her age. She pretended she hadn't heard, but those words became invisible thorns, piercing her soul. That night, she returned home with the feeling of being broken inside. At home, the silence was deafening. The children went to bed early, the husband retreated to rest, and she stayed alone in the dark living room. She stared at the ceiling and wondered if she would ever have a different life. The tears came uncontrollably, soaking her pillow night after night. There were moments when she came to believe she might have been born only to clean up the traces of others. That her existence was only this, keeping other people's lives shining while her own remained dim. This thought haunted her, making her days even heavier. But even in this scenario, there was something inside her that would not be silenced. It was a discreet voice, almost imperceptible, that said, "It's not over yet. You were not born just to suffer." That voice didn't eliminate the pain, but it was the invisible thread that kept her standing when everything around her seemed to collapse. Sometimes she felt foolish for believing in this possibility. How am I going to change? I have no education, no money, no opportunities. These questions echoed like insurmountable barriers. Yet the flame was still there, insisting on surviving. The struggle within her was silent, but real. On one side, discouragement screamed that giving up was inevitable. On the other, an almost invisible hope insisted that something greater could happen. This inner battle made each day a test of endurance. She didn't know it, but that intense pain was only preparation for a new chapter. Many times, it is at the edge of surrender that the greatest transformations arise. And although she still felt small and invisible, the universe was already aligning the pieces so her life could be rewritten in a surprising way. And so, in the contrast between despair and hope, her story approached a turning point. The cleaning lady who believed she no longer had strength was about to discover that within her there was a power capable of changing absolutely everything. Inside the house, the weight seemed even greater. The simple walls held the secrets of sleepless nights and improvised meals. On the table, a pile of accumulated bills reminded her daily that her salary was never enough. Each sealed envelope was like a sentence of failure, a silent demand that crushed her heart. The children asked for simple things, a toy, a snack, a walk. But almost always the answer was the same, not now. The children's disappointed look haunted her for hours, as if saying that a mother's love was not enough when the table was empty. That was the greatest pain, feeling incapable of giving her children the life they deserved. Her husband, also tired of fighting against scarcity, stayed silent. His silence was heavy, as if it wordlessly said he no longer believed in change. And she, even wanting to hold on to hope, stayed silent too so she wouldn't cry in front of her family. At times, she hid in the bathroom just to break down in tears, silently begging for a sign that things could change. In the early hours of the morning, she lay staring at the ceiling. Sleep never came. Her racing heart reminded her of every overdue bill, every promise she couldn't keep, every dream left on a shelf. And in the middle of these reflections, one question always returned: will I die like this, without ever achieving anything? It was at that point that despair almost defeated her. But even at rock bottom, there was something inside her that refused to go out. A small flame, almost invisible, whispering, "You were not born to stop here. There is something greater waiting for you." And this is where I want to speak to you who are following this story. Maybe you, too, know the feeling of being overwhelmed, invisible, and without a way out. Maybe you've asked yourself if life will always be this way. If this story touches your heart, write the word strength in the comments as an act of faith, declaring that you too will not give up. Take this moment as well to subscribe to the channel, because this is only the beginning of this journey. What comes next will show you how a simple cleaning lady managed to rewrite her life in a surprising way. Don't leave now. Stay with me, because the turning point you're about to see may be exactly what you needed to believe that your own story can change too. The days repeated themselves like a broken clock, always marking the same hour, always spinning in the same emptiness. She woke up early, caught the crowded bus, cleaned hallways that didn't belong to her, returned home exhausted, and went to bed without hope. It was as if she lived trapped in a cycle without end, where nothing changed and nothing had the prospect of changing. Work was always the same: damp cloths, cold floors, windows too high, buckets too heavy. Her hands no longer noticed the smell of cleaning products, because it had already blended into her own body. It was as if she had become an extension of the broom and the bucket. She wasn't Maria, she wasn't a woman, she wasn't a mother. She was just the cleaning lady. The bus, too, had become a metaphor for her life. Always full, always crowded, always carrying people from one place to another, but never leaving the same destination. She looked out the window at the busy streets, the lit shop windows, the smiling people, and wondered if one day she would be part of that other world that seemed so far away. Her salary, as small as ever, evaporated within a few days. What she earned already had a set destination: rent, bills, basic food. There was no room for dreams, not even for unexpected expenses. It was as if she lived chasing her own tail, always tired and never managing to achieve anything beyond survival. And her heart, more and more, grew accustomed to emptiness. "This is it, there's no way out," she repeated to herself. It was a bitter resignation, but it seemed the only way to endure life. It was like accepting a prison sentence without ever committing a crime. But in the midst of all that discouragement, there were days when something different would appear. A brief thought, a quick flash that maybe, just maybe, there could be something more. It was like a sliver of light slipping through a closed window. It didn't last long, but it was enough to stir her inside. And the more she tried to ignore that feeling, the stronger it seemed to grow. As if a part of her were shouting, "You weren't born for this. There is something beyond the broom, beyond the buckets, beyond the hidden tears." That silent cry followed her, even when she tried to silence her own hope. Deep down, she knew she couldn't live forever in that cycle. There was an invisible urgency beating in her chest, as if the universe itself were trying to call her to something greater. She just didn't know what it was, or how to find it. And it was exactly at this point of exhaustion and doubt that life began to move. When hope seemed to have finally gone out, the universe was already preparing an unexpected answer, one that would not appear as coincidence, but as destiny. Because many times, it is when we are on the edge of giving up that we receive the call to transformation. And the woman who saw herself as nothing was about to discover she could be everything. It was just another ordinary day, one of those when life seemed to repeat itself without change. She was cleaning a meeting room in the building, arranging chairs and picking up forgotten papers. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, illuminating the dust suspended in the air, when something on the table caught her attention. It wasn't trash, it wasn't a document. It was a book with a simple cover, but with a title that seemed to shine before her eyes. She stopped for a moment, the cleaning cloth still in her hands. She moved closer and read the words on the cover, "The Secret." Her heart raced, as if those letters hid something made especially for her. She couldn't explain why, but she felt she needed to open it. She turned the first page, hesitantly. The words leapt before her eyes: "Everything we think and feel attracts to us similar experiences." She read it once, twice, 3 times, unable to believe it. It was a completely different idea from anything she had ever heard. How could thoughts create life? The noise of the hallway made her close the book quickly, as if she had committed a forbidden boldness. But inside, something had already been awakened. She continued her work, but her mind couldn't let go of those words. She felt like someone who had found a key but didn't yet know which door it could open. She finished her shift and, before leaving, quietly returned to the room. The book was still there. She looked around, made sure no one was watching, and picked it up in her hands. She flipped through a few more pages, and each word seemed to speak directly to her. "You are the creator of your reality. The universe responds to what you believe." Her hands trembled. Her heart seemed ready to leap from her chest. No one had ever told her anything like this. She had always been told she just needed to work hard, endure, survive. Now, right there before her, was a message telling her that life could be different. She took the book with her. She didn't know if anyone would miss it, but she decided she needed those pages more than anyone else. She hid it in her bag as if she were keeping a secret treasure. That night, at home, while the children slept and silence reigned, she opened the book again. She read slowly, savoring each line. It was as if the universe had answered her silent plea, giving her exactly what she needed to hear. The tears fell without her noticing. They weren't tears of sadness, but of something new being born inside her, hope. For the first time, she believed that maybe her life wasn't condemned to failure. Maybe there was indeed a secret capable of changing everything. And so, with a forgotten book found almost by chance, her journey of transformation began. She didn't yet know how to apply it, but she already knew that nothing would be the same after that day. That night, the book rested open in her tired hands, but her mind was more awake than ever. Every word seemed to have been written for her. It wasn't just reading, it was as if she were hearing a soft voice saying, "You can do more. Your life doesn't have to end like this." It was hard to believe, but impossible to ignore. The next day, she couldn't wait to get home. She went through her cleaning tasks mechanically, almost on autopilot, but her heart was somewhere else. Each time she thought about the book's phrases, she felt a different warmth in her chest, as if a seed had been planted in fertile soil. At night, when everyone was asleep, she lit a candle and read in silence. She discovered that thoughts created her reality, that the universe responded to the energy she gave off. She reread several times a passage that said, "If you think of scarcity, you attract more scarcity. If you think of abundance, you attract abundance." This idea unsettled her and at the same time set her free. She began to reflect on her own life. How many times had she called herself a failure? How many times had she repeated to herself that she couldn't, that there was no way out? She realized her mind had become a factory of negative thoughts, and that maybe this was what kept her life in the same place. With each page, her heart beat faster. The book spoke about visualizing, about being grateful before receiving, about believing as if it had already happened. It all seemed too magical, almost impossible, but something inside her said, "What if it's true? What if this is what I was missing?" She decided she wouldn't let those ideas die within the reading. She grabbed an old notebook with a torn cover and began to write down the phrases that touched her. She wrote, "I am worthy of prosperity. I create my own reality. The universe conspires in my favor." Even without fully understanding, she felt more alive each time she wrote. During work breaks, hidden in a corner, she discreetly opened the book and read another passage. Some colleagues found her silence strange, but she didn't care. It was as if she had found a secret fountain of hope, and she didn't want to waste a single drop. Sometimes, fear returned. Her mind said, "This is nonsense. It changes nothing." But just rereading a few lines was enough to reignite her faith. It was as if the book were an open window to a new world, where she could dream without feeling ashamed. Little by little, the once invisible cleaning lady began to see a new version of herself. There were no external changes yet, but inside she already felt the difference. Something greater was happening, something that no broom, bucket, or overdue bill could erase. Have you ever felt this way too? Have you ever had the sense of being trapped in a routine with no way out, but at the same time with a voice inside you saying that life can be different? If so, write the words "I believe" in the comments. This simple declaration could be the first step to transforming your reality, just as it happened with her. And so, night after night, those pages began shaping a new story. She still didn't know how, but she was already certain of one thing: her life was about to change forever. The next morning, even before leaving for work, she remembered what she had read. The book said you had to start by believing, even without seeing proof. She took a deep breath, placed her hand on her chest, and with a timid voice said, "I am worthy of prosperity. I am capable. I deserve an abundant life." The words sounded strange, as if they didn't belong to her, but she repeated them anyway. As she walked to the bus stop, she tried to imagine herself in another reality. She closed her eyes for a few seconds and saw herself arriving in a beautiful place, where she carried no buckets or cloths but was treated with respect. The scene seemed distant, yet it brought a good feeling, like a glimpse of something possible. At work, the routine hadn't changed: heavy buckets, cold floors, indifferent stares. But inside her, there was a subtle difference. Instead of repeating to herself that she was tired, she remembered the phrases from the book. When her mind said, "You can't," she silently replied, "I can, the universe is on my side." At night, she opened the old notebook again. She wrote her first affirmations inspired by the book: "My life is prosperous. I receive abundance. The universe conspires for my good." As she wrote, she felt a strange warmth in her chest, as if those words carried more weight than simple sentences. In the days that followed, she turned this act into a habit. In the morning, before leaving, she repeated affirmations in a low voice. At night, she wrote in her notebook. She didn't yet see concrete results, but she noticed her energy shifting. She no longer woke up feeling as heavy. She felt a quiet but real hope, like a flame slowly growing. There were moments of doubt. She wondered if she was just fooling herself. But every time she read another page of the book, she found encouragement to keep going. One phrase in particular marked her: "Everything you desire already exists in the universe. It is up to you to align with it." So, she decided to align herself. She closed her eyes before sleeping and visualized the table full of food, her children smiling, the electric bill paid on time, her heart light. These small exercises became her refuge, the place where she could build a different reality. She didn't tell anyone about this practice. She kept it as a secret, afraid they would laugh at her. But deep inside, she knew she was touching something powerful. It was as if she were speaking with the universe in silence, and that conversation made her stronger. Each word written in the notebook was a seed. Each visualization was a drawing made in the invisible. And, even without realizing it, she was beginning to water the soil of her own life with new thoughts, different from those that had kept her trapped for so many years. And so, between timid phrases and scribbled pages, the cleaning lady took her first steps toward transformation. There were still no external signs, but inside her the change was already inevitable. The notebook, which before had been just a forgotten object in a drawer, had now become an essential part of her routine. Every night, before going to bed, she sat with it on her lap and a pen in her hands. She didn't write complaints or grievances, as she used to in other times, but declarations of faith. Each page filled with phrases like, "I live in abundance. I attract prosperity. My life is changing now." At first, it felt strange. Her heart still doubted, and her mind tried to sabotage her, saying, "You are writing lies." But she persisted. Each word on the paper was like a brick building an invisible future. She felt that, somehow, she was speaking directly to the universe. A short time later, the first signs began to appear. One day, a coworker who rarely spoke to her complimented her effort and said, "There's a sparkle in your eyes, you seem more confident." It wasn't money, it wasn't a promotion, but it was the first time in years that someone recognized something positive in her. And that was enough to warm her heart. Another night, after writing in her notebook that she would have a full table for her children, something unexpected happened. A neighbor knocked on her door offering vegetables and fruits left over from a market. She thanked her with emotion, and when she placed the food on the table, she remembered what she had written just a few hours earlier. It was impossible not to see it as an answer. These small episodes multiplied. Nothing grand yet, but signs that made her believe more and more. It was as if the universe were testing her faith, showing her that yes, there was a real connection between what she wrote and what she lived. She began calling the notebook her manifestation notebook. Each page written was a silent prayer, each phrase a key opening invisible doors. She wrote about prosperity, about happiness, about peace. And the more she wrote, the more she realized her mind was changing. Little by little, she no longer spoke so much about failure. Instead of saying, "I don't have," she learned to say, "It's on its way." Instead of repeating, "I'm invisible," she wrote, "I am seen, I am valued, I am worthy." This change in vocabulary was also a change in the energy she radiated. Her children began to notice. One of them asked, "Mom, why do you smile to yourself when you're writing?" She just smiled and replied, "I'm writing our future." And that simple answer made the child's eyes shine. There were still no great miracles, but she knew she was on the path. With each word, she felt closer to the life she desired. The notebook was not just an object, it was the portal to the transformation that was about to come. And so, between scribbled pages and renewed faith, the woman began to see the reality around her respond to the seeds planted in her mind. The cycle of scarcity was beginning to break, and the universe was showing that it was listening to every word written with hope. Each small response she received was fuel to keep going. She no longer wrote in her notebook afraid of dreaming too big, but with the certainty that she was speaking to a universe that truly listened. She felt that the pages, filled with positive phrases, were like seeds scattered into fertile soil. All she had to do was keep watering them, and the fruits would come in due time. She began carrying the notebook everywhere. On the bus, during work breaks, even at lunchtime. Whenever she had a few minutes, she opened it and read in a low voice the phrases she had written. Many times she closed her eyes and visualized the scene as if it were already real, the house full of abundance, the children smiling, life light and prosperous. What once seemed like a strange exercise turned into a habit. And, over time, that habit became part of her identity. She no longer saw herself only as a cleaning lady, now she saw herself as someone building a new life, page by page, thought by thought. This inner change began to show on the outside. People at work noticed she was different. She no longer walked with her head down, she no longer spoke with such pessimism. A colleague commented, "You carry a good energy these days, you even look younger." She smiled, without revealing the secret, but knowing the transformation came from within. Her husband noticed too. Before, he was used to seeing her complain and cry. Now, although the difficulties still existed, she spoke more about solutions than about problems. When the electricity bill arrived late, instead of despair, she said, "We'll manage to pay it. The universe is already helping us." This attitude surprised the family, but little by little, it began to affect them as well. And indeed, small opportunities began to appear. A resident of the building asked her to do some extra tasks and paid more than expected. Another neighbor offered clothes in great condition for the children. These things, which once seemed like mere coincidences, she now recognized as answers from the universe. The notebook, fuller with each passing day, became her greatest proof that faith and consistency worked. She reread old pages and smiled when she realized that some things had already happened exactly as she had written. This experience reinforced her confidence even more. She learned that she didn't need to understand every detail of how the universe worked. She just needed to believe, give thanks, and keep practicing. This simplicity set her free because it took away the weight of doubt and made room for the lightness of faith. Deep down, she knew something much greater was on its way. The small signs were only the beginning. And the more she believed, the more she felt she was approaching a transformation that would surpass everything she had ever imagined. And so, between written pages, repeated affirmations, and a faith that grew each day, the invisible cleaning lady began to give way to a woman discovering her true power. The universe was not only listening to her but responding, step by step, to each declaration written with hope. The universe seemed to be responding more and more clearly. After weeks of writing in her manifestation notebook and repeating affirmations, an unexpected opportunity appeared. One of the residents of the building where she worked pulled her aside and said, "You are very dedicated. I would like to hire you to take care of the cleaning in my private home twice a week." The payment was more than double what she received for an ordinary day of cleaning. In that instant, she felt her heart almost leap out of her chest. It wasn't just about the money, it was the confirmation that the sentences written on the pages were beginning to materialize. She gave silent thanks, remembering the times she had written, "I receive new opportunities. Prosperity finds me where I am." When she shared the news at home, her children jumped with joy. Her husband hugged her with pride, recognizing the courage and dedication she had been showing. For the first time in a long while, the atmosphere at home felt lighter, as if a dark cloud had begun to lift. The following days brought other small surprises. She received tips she had never gotten before, sincere compliments from people who usually ignored her, and even a gift basket from a woman who said she had simply felt the urge to help her. To her, none of this was coincidence. They were answers from the universe to what she had been cultivating in her heart. The manifestation notebook became a living testimony of these achievements. Rereading old phrases, she smiled as she realized that many were already happening. She felt as though she were writing the future and, little by little, watching it take shape before her eyes. That feeling made her take the habit even more seriously. Now, she didn't just write short phrases but detailed entire scenes. She imagined her children with new clothes, the table full of food, the house organized and joyful. The more details she added, the more real it seemed. Her confidence also began to show in her behavior. At work, she no longer bowed her head as before, no longer felt invisible. She carried out her tasks with dignity but carried within herself a new posture. That energy was noticed, and even her coworkers began to look at her differently. Her husband, once doubtful, began to show interest. He asked how the notebook worked and even tried writing a few phrases himself. Seeing her transformation inspired him to believe that he too could change. It was no longer just an individual process, but a change that was beginning to reach the whole family. The children, curious, asked to join in. She taught each of them to write their own phrases. "I am smart. I have many friends. I am happy." The children's laughter filled the house, and the energy felt completely different. It was as if they had opened a door for abundance to enter. And, in the face of every small or great result, she realized a simple truth: life responded exactly to what she chose to believe. She was no longer just a cleaning lady. Now, she was a woman who wrote, believed, and saw the universe turn words into reality. With new opportunities appearing, her life began to gain a different color. What once was only a struggle to survive was now becoming a path of small victories. Each new chance that appeared seemed to confirm what she had been writing in her notebook. It was as if the words had stopped being scribbles on paper and had turned into bridges toward a different reality. Financial security was not abundant yet, but there was finally room to breathe. For the first time, she managed to pay the bills without leaving anything overdue. She felt an indescribable joy when she saw everything paid. It seemed like a simple gesture, but for her it was a powerful symbol, proof that she was no longer drowning in endless debt. This feeling of relief opened space for a new thought: if I was able to change this, what else can I achieve? That question echoed in her mind during bus rides, during work breaks, and even in the silent nights at home. It was as if the universe were expanding her vision, inviting her to dream beyond cleaning. The notebook began to reflect this new moment. She no longer wrote only survival phrases, but bold declarations. I have my own business. I am recognized for my work. I inspire other people to believe. As she wrote, she felt chills run through her body, as if she could already touch that future. In her heart, a seed began to sprout. She remembered the compliments she received for her organization and attention to detail. She remembered the client who said her house felt completely different after her cleaning. That's when she thought, what if I could turn this into something bigger? What if I could offer more than cleaning, but an experience of care? This thought followed her in silence. She didn't yet know how she would do it, nor where to begin, but she already felt it was possible. The pages of the notebook filled with dreams, and every time she wrote, her faith grew stronger. Her husband, noticing the transformation, encouraged her. He said, "You've always had talent, you just didn't believe in yourself. Maybe it's time to take a bigger step." Those words fell like fresh water on dry ground. It was the confirmation she needed to believe she wasn't dreaming alone. Her children also took part, celebrating each achievement. The joy at home was no longer suffocated by scarcity, but fueled by hope. The atmosphere felt lighter, as if each of them had become a partner in the same dream. And the more she believed, the more the universe seemed to conspire. She received compliments from clients who recommended her work to others, her income slowly increased, and she was even starting to save again, but now not only to pay off debts, but to invest in the future. It was the beginning of a new vision. The invisible cleaning lady who once believed there was no way out was now beginning to dream of the impossible. And, as she wrote in her notebook, she no longer saw only phrases, she saw the construction of a new identity, that of a woman ready to create her own prosperity. The notebook's pages were no longer just scattered phrases but detailed plans. She began writing not only, "I have my own business," but also, "My business is clean, organized, full of satisfied clients, and I prosper more every day." This clarity brought a new energy. It was as if she were drawing the future with her words. During her cleaning jobs, she observed the spaces with different eyes. She noticed how products were organized, how cleaning could be optimized, details that before went unnoticed. She realized she had something beyond physical strength, she had talent, creativity, and a care that could become her trademark. On bus rides, instead of getting lost in negative thoughts, she began to plan. She wrote down ideas in her notebook, creating a small team, offering service packages, investing in better materials. Everything seemed far away, but for the first time, it didn't seem impossible. One day, she timidly mentioned to a trusted client, "I've been thinking about starting my own cleaning business." The client smiled and replied, "You have a real gift for this. You already do the work of a company, the only thing missing is believing that you can be the owner." Those words stayed with her for days, reinforcing that it wasn't just her imagination. At home, she shared the dream with her husband. He listened carefully and said, "If this is what you want, we'll find a way to start. It may be small, but it will already be ours." That sense of partnership moved her deeply. For the first time, she felt she wasn't carrying the dream alone. Her children, always attentive, got excited about the idea. They asked how they could help, and she answered, "You already help just by believing in me." The sparkle in their eyes was the fuel she needed to keep moving forward. With the little money she had managed to save, she bought some better cleaning products and a new bag to carry them. It might have seemed like a small step to others, but for her it was enormous. It wasn't just working, it was investing in something she called my business. The manifestation notebook gained new pages dedicated only to this dream. There, she detailed everything: the name she wanted to give the company, how the services would be offered, how she wanted to be recognized. The more she wrote, the more she felt she was building a bridge between the present and the future. There was still fear, there were still doubts. But now fear was no longer greater than faith. Each sentence written, each plan scribbled, each visualization made at night was a way of telling the universe, I am ready. I believe. I already live this dream. And so, the woman who once saw herself as just an invisible cleaning lady began to recognize herself as an entrepreneur. The business was still in its infancy, but it carried within it the strength of faith and transformation. The impossible no longer seemed so far away, it was simply under construction. The plans she wrote in the notebook began to leave the page. It was no longer just imagination, the universe seemed to open doors in every detail. A loyal client recommended her to others, and soon she had more work than she could handle alone. This excess demand, which once would have meant exhaustion, was now a clear sign that she needed to grow. That was when she decided to take a bold step. She took part of the money she had been saving and rented a small commercial space near her home. It was simple, almost hidden on a quiet street, but for her it represented the materialization of years of effort. When she placed the key in the door for the first time, she cried silently. She wasn't just opening a physical place, she was opening a future. With the help of her husband and children, she cleaned and organized every corner. They painted the walls white, set up improvised shelves, and arranged the cleaning supplies she had purchased. It may have looked modest to the neighbors, but to her it was a palace. There, her first headquarters was born, a space where she would no longer be just an employee, but an owner. In the notebook, she wrote, "My business prospers. This space is blessed. Here I welcome satisfied clients and multiply opportunities." She felt that each sentence written was like a prayer sealing that new cycle. The first clients began arriving thanks to referrals. People from the neighborhood came by, some just to look, others to hire her. Little by little, the clientele grew, and she started employing 2 women from the community who were also struggling. It was no longer just about her, she was now opening doors for other families. Business increased every week. There were days when she could barely handle all the requests, but instead of complaining, she smiled. She remembered the days when she believed she would have nothing. Now, she had something of her own, built with faith, sweat, and perseverance. Her children helped however they could, they handed out flyers, organized supplies, even drew a simple logo for the company. This family unity gave even more meaning to the achievement. It wasn't just a business, it was the collective victory of everyone who believed in her when no one else did. In the neighborhood, they no longer called her just a cleaning lady. Now, they said, she's the owner of the cleaning company. The respect in people's eyes was something she had never experienced before. And deep down, she knew it wasn't only hard work that had brought her here, but the secret she had learned and practiced with consistency. Even tired at the end of the day, she sat in front of her notebook and wrote. Now, her sentences were even bolder, "My business expands to other cities. I am a reference in my field. My story inspires other people." And when she closed the notebook each night, she felt at peace. The woman who once believed she was invisible now had her own space, clients, recognition, and above all, the certainty that she was only at the beginning of something much greater. The small rented space, which at first seemed too big for her dreams, soon became too small for the growing demand. Clients from neighboring districts began seeking her out, drawn by her reputation for thoroughness and honesty. What once was only word of mouth in the community was now spreading throughout the city. she realized she could no longer manage on her own. She hired 2 more employees, women who, like her, carried stories of struggle and invisibility. Hiring them was not just a business decision, but a mission. She felt she was giving back to the universe the help she had once received. Each satisfied client brought another. And with every new contract signed, she remembered the pages written in the manifestation notebook. Everything she had detailed there was beginning to come to life before her eyes. It was as if the paper were a mirror of the future, and now the reflection was becoming reality. People began to take interest not only in the service but in the story behind it. Some asked how she had managed to move from ordinary cleaning to starting a business. At first, she answered shyly. But little by little, she realized her words awakened something in others: hope. A local newspaper heard about her journey and published a simple article, "From Cleaning Lady to Business Owner, the story of overcoming that inspires the city." When she saw her name in print and her photo on display, she could hardly hold back the tears. She was no longer invisible. Her story had a voice. The impact was immediate. New clients appeared, invitations for local radio interviews arrived, and even the city hall invited her to take part in an event about female entrepreneurship. There, before a small audience, she shared her journey for the first time in public. Her hands trembled, but her heart overflowed with gratitude. As she spoke, she realized something profound: people weren't there just to hear about cleaning or business, but about transformation. Each of her words was a mirror for other women who still saw themselves trapped in invisibility. And at the end of the improvised talk, several came up to thank her. That experience planted a new seed inside her. Perhaps her mission wasn't only to be an entrepreneur, but also to inspire. Perhaps the universe had led her through all that path of pain and overcoming precisely so she could show others that it was possible too. The notebook, as always, recorded this new vision. She wrote, "My story inspires multitudes. I am invited to share my secret. I help other people believe in themselves." She didn't know how it would happen, but she trusted that if the universe had already done so much, it would do even more. And so, the woman who once saw herself fading among brooms and buckets was now recognized as a businesswoman, an example of courage and hope. The cycle of invisibility was broken. She had a voice, a purpose, and the certainty that her story was still only beginning. The success of her cleaning company grew at a steady pace. The simple space she had rented had become a point of reference, and now she was already thinking about opening a branch in another neighborhood. With each new client she gained, she confirmed in her heart that the secret truly worked. Everything she wrote, everything she visualized, one day became real. But along with the growth of the business came a new phase in her life, the phase of being heard. Invitations began arriving from different places. First, they were small meetings in schools and community associations, where she shared her journey as an example of overcoming. Then came larger events, organized by institutions that promoted female entrepreneurship. At first, speaking in public was terrifying. Her hands sweated, her voice faltered. But when she saw the attentive eyes of the people, especially simple women like she once had been, she understood that her vulnerability was precisely what made her speech powerful. She was not theoretical, she was real. She wasn't speaking from books alone, but from a life transformed by faith and practice. Each talk became a moment of healing, not only for those who listened but also for herself. Remembering her difficult past gave her even more gratitude for the present. And when someone said, "Your story made me believe again," she felt she was fulfilling a greater purpose. The invitations grew so much that she had to organize her schedule. Sometimes she went straight from an event to work at the company, balancing the two worlds. It was exhausting, but she had never felt so satisfied. She was living something that once seemed impossible. The impact spread beyond words. Some women, inspired by her, began writing down their own dreams in manifestation notebooks. Others decided to start small businesses, confident that they could too. Realizing this moved her deeply. It wasn't only about what she had achieved, but about what she awakened in others. The local newspaper interviewed her again, this time not only as a businesswoman but as an inspirational speaker. The article carried the headline, "From Cleaning to Conferences, the Woman Who Became a Symbol of Hope." When she read those words, she cried again, remembering when no one even noticed her presence. At home, the pride of her family was visible. Her children told their classmates that their mother now gave talks. Her husband, once silent and weary, now smiled often, saying, "I always knew you had something special." This change in the eyes of those she loved most was an even greater victory than money or recognition. In the notebook, she wrote firmly, "I speak to multitudes. I bring hope to those who once thought of giving up. My voice is a channel of transformation." These phrases, repeated with faith, filled her with courage for the steps ahead. And so, the woman who once saw herself as invisible was now being heard by dozens, hundreds, and soon, thousands. She was no longer just a businesswoman. She was a leader, a living reference that when the mind changes, life itself changes. What began as small conversations in community associations soon grew larger. One day, she received an invitation that seemed unbelievable, to speak at a regional conference about women entrepreneurs. At first, she doubted herself. Me? On a stage? In front of so many important people? But she quickly remembered what she had written in her notebook, "I speak to multitudes." The universe was simply responding. On the day of the event, nervousness almost overcame her. When she saw the full audience, her heart raced. But when she took the microphone and shared how she had once cried alone in the bathroom because she couldn't pay the bills, she saw tears rolling down the faces in the audience. She realized then that her truth was her strength. She didn't need to be perfect, she needed to be real. Each word she spoke seemed to ignite a flame in the people. She told how she had found a forgotten book, how she had started writing in an old notebook, and how the daily practice of faith and positive thinking had transformed her life. With each account, she heard murmurs of agreement and saw heads nodding in recognition. At the end of the talk, she was given a standing ovation. The sound echoed in her heart like confirmation that she was on the right path. She had never felt anything so powerful. She remembered the invisible woman who once cleaned hallways without being noticed and smiled. Now, she was seen, she was heard, she was recognized. After the event, several people came up to hug her, thank her, and ask for advice. A young woman said, "I'm a cleaning lady too, but now I believe I can change my story." That comment moved her deeply. She understood that every time she shared her journey, she wasn't just speaking, she was delivering hope. The impact of the conference was immediate. Other cities began inviting her, asking her to share her story. Her schedule now included travel, something that once seemed unthinkable. In each place, she met new people touched by her story, and that fueled her purpose even more. Meanwhile, her company was also flourishing. The number of employees grew, contracts increased, and now she had a consolidated professional structure. The business that once began with a bucket and a broom was now a respected brand in the city and beyond. The most incredible part was that she managed to balance both missions, to run her business and to inspire. In the morning, she took care of the company. In the afternoon or evening, she stepped onto stages to share her message. Each role nourished the other, the entrepreneur strengthened the speaker, and the speaker strengthened the entrepreneur. The notebook remained her inseparable companion. In it, she wrote not only her next dreams but also recorded gratitude for everything she had already achieved. She read and reread the old pages, remembering that it had all begun with simple phrases and persistent faith. And so, the woman who was once invisible was now becoming a striking presence on stage. It was no longer only about cleaning or business. It was about transformation, purpose, and living proof that the universe responds when we choose to believe. The stages that once seemed big now grew even larger. She was invited to participate in a national event about women who had transformed their lives through entrepreneurship. The invitation came through a formal letter, printed on letterhead. As she read it, her hands trembled. Who would have thought that the invisible cleaning lady of yesterday would now be featured in a conference broadcast on television? The day of the event arrived, and the auditorium was packed. More than 1,000 people awaited her speech. She took a deep breath, remembered every phrase written in her notebook, and walked onto the stage. The bright light blinded her for a moment, but when she looked at the audience, she saw attentive faces full of expectation. She felt taken over by a force greater than her nervousness. With a firm voice, she began recounting her former reality, the silent hallways she cleaned, the piled-up bills, the tears hidden in her pillow. The audience listened in absolute silence, as if each word were a mirror of their own struggles. Then she revealed the secret, the forgotten book, the manifestation notebook, the daily practice of believing and writing. The impact was immediate. Many cried, others applauded, others simply closed their eyes, absorbing each phrase. It was as if, at that moment, her voice traveled across the auditorium and reached the silent wounds of hundreds of people. The media coverage amplified her story even more. The next day, newspapers carried headlines such as, "From cleaning lady to entrepreneur and speaker, the woman who transformed her life with the power of the mind." Interviews were scheduled, radio and TV shows invited her to share her journey. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. New invitations came from universities, companies, and even international organizations. Her story was crossing borders. People who had never heard of her were now repeating her words as mantras of hope. Amid this whirlwind, she kept her simplicity. She continued writing in her notebook every night, giving thanks for each achievement and declaring the next steps. She didn't let success go to her head, because she knew the secret was not fame but steady faith and disciplined practice. At home, the family was living a new chapter. Her children were proud to say that their mother was not only a businesswoman but also a recognized speaker. Her husband, moved, accompanied her to some events, holding her hand with the same tenderness as when they had faced the days of scarcity together. Despite the crowds and the cameras, she never forgot where she had come from. In every speech, she made a point of saying, "If I made it, anyone can." Because transformation doesn't begin outside, but inside. And everything you believe and write, the universe brings back. These phrases became her signature, repeated by thousands of people. And so, the woman who once saw herself as invisible was now lighting up stages, inspiring multitudes, and proving that there is no fixed destiny. The universe can turn entire pages of a life when someone decides to write their own story. With time, the invitations went beyond her city, then her state, and finally her country. She was invited to share her story at an international event on overcoming adversity. When she received the news, she couldn't hold back the tears. Who would have thought that the woman who once felt invisible would now cross oceans to share her voice? The trip was unforgettable. As she entered the packed auditorium, with people from different nationalities, she realized her message went beyond one culture or language. It was universal. It spoke of pain, faith, and transformation, things everyone understands, no matter where they are. On stage, She remembered the cleaning lady who cried in secret, the woman who wrote in an old notebook, the mother who couldn't pay the bills. As she shared her journey, she saw moved faces, people who may never have worked as cleaners but who knew the pain of feeling too small in the face of life. It was in that moment that she understood something even greater. Her story was not only about her. It was a reflection of what anyone can achieve when they decide to change from within. The secret wasn't in the book she found or in the notebook where she wrote, the secret had been inside her all along. And that is what I want to say to you who have followed this journey. The same power that changed this woman's life is already there, inside you. Maybe today you feel trapped, limited, or invisible, but within your heart lies the strength capable of completely rewriting your story. She was no different from you. She had no privileges, no wealth, no advanced education. What she had was faith, the courage to try, and the persistence to keep writing even when nothing seemed to change. And it is this same courage that can transform your life starting now. So, if this story touched your heart, don't ignore this sign. Believe that you too can prosper, can inspire, can reach places that today seem impossible. Change begins within, and when you take the first step, the entire universe moves in your favor. And if you want to continue receiving stories, messages, and inspirations that strengthen your faith and help you keep that flame alive, subscribe now to the channel. Each new piece of content will be like a new page in your own manifestation notebook. Sharing this story is not only about celebrating one achievement, but about opening the way for thousands of other people to awaken the same power they already carry within themselves. You could be the next voice to inspire multitudes. Because the universe is generous, and when you decide to believe, there is no limit to how far you can go. When she looks back, she can hardly recognize the woman she once was. The invisible cleaning lady, who used to walk with her head down through the hallways, now walks with her head held high before multitudes. The worn-out uniform was replaced by the glow of confidence, and the tears once hidden in her pillow gave way to smiles of victory. It all began with a forgotten book in a room and an old notebook that became her greatest treasure. There, among words written with faith, she built a future that once seemed impossible. Each sentence was a brick, each visualization a foundation, and each declaration a key that opened the doors of abundance. Today, she is not only the owner of a prosperous company. She is also a voice that echoes on stages, shows, and in hearts. She is living proof that it doesn't matter where you come from, but where you decide to go. Her journey shows that the power of transformation was never outside, but always within her. And this is where her story meets yours. Because if she was able to rise from invisibility to become a successful woman, you can too. The secret is not in external circumstances, but in the daily choice to believe, to write, and to act as if it were already possible. Maybe you look around and see only limitations. But remember, that's exactly how she began. With debts, exhaustion, and pain. And yet, she chose to take a step of faith. The universe responded, just as it always responds to those who dare to believe. Life doesn't have to be an endless repetition. It can be a building, a process, a journey of transformation. And that journey begins the moment you decide to stop repeating scarcity and start declaring abundance. The same power she discovered is already there, inside you. You just have to choose to use it. Start writing, dreaming, believing. Every word is a seed, every thought is an invitation for the universe to act. And remember, you don't need to have everything to begin. She started with nothing more than faith and an old notebook. Today, she inspires thousands. What could happen when you start now? So if this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to keep receiving messages that will strengthen your faith and keep this flame alive within you. Because this may be only the first chapter of your own transformation. The woman who was once invisible discovered that she had always carried within herself the secret of abundance. And now that secret has been revealed to you. The choice is yours: remain invisible, or begin today to write your new story of success.